Let's go Browns! Pay attention, because what you're about to tell us now directly impacts the future of our time, and perhaps the entire season. The Quinshon Judkins case has taken on enormous proportions after the police report about his alleged domestic violence was released, and the information is disturbing, to say the least. What strikes me most is that, while we're talking about something extremely serious from a human perspective, this also compromises the Cleveland Browns' planning and raises an important question. Will Judkins ever wear our jersey on the field? Before continuing, make sure to like this post, but only do so if you've been a Browns fan for over 17 years. It's always great to see loyal fans of all generations interacting here. It means a lot to us. If you can, write, "Go Browns! My heart bleeds brown and orange." It all starts on Monday, July 7th. Judkins and the victim, his girlfriend, arrived at Fort Lauderdale International Airport at night. According to the police report, after leaving the restroom and heading to baggage claim, the situation became awkward. Judkins reportedly said something along the lines of, "Wow, I don't believe you, and I'm sick of you." Clearly, some information arrived at that moment, something that deeply angered him, and which, apparently, was related to text messages he received from family members. We don't know the exact content of these messages, but based on the reported behavior, we can speculate that Judkins believed something serious related to his girlfriend. From that point on, the atmosphere became tense. The two then got into an off-road Lamborghini SUV, and just at this point, it's worth pausing. What kind of decision is this to rent an expensive car before even signing an NFL contract? But let's move on to the important point. Judkins, according to the report, showed growing pride as he read messages from family members and confronted his girlfriend. She tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, but, according to the report, it was at that point that the situation escalated to violence. The victim claims Judkins punched her in the mouth and chin with a closed fist. She showed the police photos of visible bruises on her chin and lips, recorded immediately after the incident. It's important to note that all of this happened on the 7th, but the police were only contacted on the 12th, 5 days later. Why did this take so long? The victim reportedly explained that she initially didn't want to report the incident because she didn't want to jeopardize Judkins' career, as he had recently been drafted by the NFL. She was reportedly considering the impact a complaint could have on him. But after talking to friends and family, she changed her mind, understanding that no one should get away with it just because they play in the NFL. This change in attitude is understandable. Can you imagine the pressure she must have felt? On one side, her boyfriend and all the expectations surrounding her career. On the other, the knowledge that physical behavior cannot be ignored. Returning to the truth about the night, the account becomes even more difficult. The victim claims that, during the drive, Judkins turned around while driving and attacked her again, this time punching her in the left arm and thigh. Again, the bruises were documented in photos. At one point, she tried to defend herself with kicks, and at another, she even got out of the car in a Burger King parking lot, threatening not to return. But in the end, she got back in the car and clearly stated, "Don't touch me again." This is an important detail because it shows that, even after the first assault, the conflict continued. Judkins was only arrested after the victim filed a complaint on the 12th, and upon his arrest, he was informed of his rights and taken into custody. Now, the burning question, what will the Browns do with him? Judkins' contractual situation further complicates matters. He hasn't signed his employment contract, and it's very likely that the Browns will make any decisions until more information comes to light. The most likely scenario, according to analysis from those following the team's behind-the-scenes analysis, is that Judkins signed a contract with little or no guaranteed money, receiving a 4 to 6 game suspension that may only be applicable on the field after the first month of the season. During this period, the burden will likely fall on Jerome Ford and, to some extent, Dylan Sampson. But let's be honest, losing a promising running back so early weighs heavily on the team's ambitions. And this raises another question that no one can ignore. How long will this lack of leadership within the squad continue? It's not just Judkins. We're talking about a pattern we've seen with other players, from Mike Hall to Perry Winfrey. What does this say about the culture being built at the Browns? Why do the rookies seem to believe they can do anything without major consequences? The Judkins case is just another symptom of something much larger. But before we get into that and talk about the real impact that our team's first team member, I want to hear from you. What do you think of all this so far? Do you think the Browns should give him a chance after this episode, or is it time to draw a hard line and cut any player involved in such controversies? Leave your opinions in the comments, because in the second part, I'll delve even deeper into what this means for the future of the season and how this case may reflect a much deeper problem within the Cleveland Browns structure. And this is where the situation becomes even more intriguing for those who truly follow the Browns' day-to-day activities, because we're not just talking about an isolated incident. What's happening with Quinshon Judkins brutally exposes a structural problem within the Cleveland Browns that goes far beyond a simple issue of individual discipline. When we look at recent history, we see a worrying pattern. Rookies who get involved in controversies, veterans who seemingly fail to set a solid example, and a leadership that, at least from the outside, seems incapable of enforcing a standard of behavior that lives up to what a winning franchise demands. And I know many of you are thinking exactly that. Why always with the Browns? The answer may lie in what analysts who closely follow the locker room situation have described. There's a perception that the team's internal culture doesn't convey the message. It's different here. We behave according to what this jersey represents. Comparisons with other, more disciplined franchises are inevitable. When you hear reports of rookies joining the roster feeling comfortable acting as if nothing has consequences, it screams for a drastic change in attitude. And the Judkins case is the most recent and most visible example of this. Now, returning to the direct impact on the season, with Judkins potentially out for 4 to 6 games, the pressure on Jerome Ford increases considerably. Dylan Sampson, who I actually like as a prospect, could even be used in some situations, but there's no way you could put the weight of an entire running attack on the shoulders of a rookie still learning the rhythm of the NFL. This wasn't the original idea behind the 2025 offensive plan. Judkins, when drafted, was envisioned as a potential bell cow, someone who would balance the offense and create space for the passing game to flow better. Now, with this potential extended layoff, the Browns could start the season with a predictable and limited offense, and we all know what that means in an increasingly competitive AFC. But the impact isn't just technical. There's a psychological effect within the roster. Players are starting to question decisions. Some may feel demotivated. And, worse, the veterans who should be the pillars of behavior seem unable to handle the responsibility. When we look at what was said in the report itself, it's clear that the Browns' leadership has failed to create an environment where young players understand that there is a standard to be followed. And I'm not the only one saying this. The list of recent incidents involving Browns rookies is long enough that it's no coincidence. Jadder Sanders, Mike Hall, Perry Winfrey, and now Judkins. When the number of cases like this starts to grow, it's no longer an exception. And here's a point I know will divide opinion. Would cutting Judkins solve anything? For some, that would be the strongest message to send. But, knowing the Browns' history, that doesn't seem likely. Just remember how the franchise has handled recent incidents. Mike Hall, for example, remained on the roster. So, betting that the Browns will suddenly take a hard line and cut Judkins to send a message seems unlikely, to say the least. This raises an even more uncomfortable question. Is the front office really willing to put the team's discipline and reputation above potential talent on the field? And, let's face it, Judkins is still seen as a player with a lot of potential. The expectation is that, even with the suspension, he will eventually see action this year. The most talked about prediction behind the scenes is that the Browns will likely sign him to a contract with very little guaranteed money, just enough to cover formalities, and accept the initial suspension, which is expected to be between 4 and 6 games, with the NFL adding to that the time he'll be sidelined internally. So, for those hoping for a permanent cut, the reality is likely different. The Browns will bet on him, perhaps more out of necessity than conviction. And this is where our responsibility as passionate but also demanding fans comes in. Will we accept this as normal? Because if the team continues to treat these incidents as individual problems and not as a reflection of a flaw in the organizational culture, we'll continue to see headlines like this every day. The years have passed. You can't hope to compete for titles with a locker room that doesn't behave like a winning team. And I want you to think with me, is it worth keeping a player who arrives with this kind of controversy, even if he has the talent to change games? Do you think the Browns should use this case as an example to bring order to the locker room? Or can the team afford to let go of a player who, in theory, could make a difference on the field? Leave your opinions here in the comments.